The ambulance gets there in 6 minutes. Linda is on the kitchen floor when it arrives, one hand still holding the phone she used to call it herself, because 34 years as a nurse means you recognize your own stroke symptoms faster than anyone else in the room could. The coffee she'd started that morning is still warm on the counter. A grocery list sits half written on a notepad beside it, the last item trailing off mid-word. There is no one else in the room. Her daughter finds out 40 minutes later, in a hospital hallway, from a doctor she's never met, still wearing the cardigan she'd thrown on to drop her kids at school. Think about the person in your own family everyone calls the strong one. The one nobody worries about, because worrying about her has simply never occurred to anyone, including her. Now imagine that same person, alone on a kitchen floor, having already quietly decided, years ago, never to be anyone's burden. By the end of this video, you'll understand what that decision actually costs, not just to Linda, but to the family who never once got the chance to help carry it. Call her Linda. 61. An ICU nurse for over 3 decades, the kind of nurse younger staff request specifically, calm in the exact moments other people fall apart. She raised 2 kids alone after her husband left, put both through school on a nurse's salary, which is its own kind of impossible math nobody ever fully explains. Her son, Marcus, 29, works retail management, good at his job, still climbing. Her daughter, Jenny, 32, has 2 kids under 5 and a husband whose hours got cut 18 months ago. And her own mother, Dorothy, 84, lives alone 2 towns over, increasingly not quite able to. 3 generations. 1 paycheck holding significant pieces of all of them together. How many paychecks in how many other families are doing exactly this right now, silently, without anyone keeping count? Nobody in this story is asking for too much. That's what makes it worth watching closely. Marcus needed $400 for rent, just once, he said, 18 months ago, standing in her kitchen looking about 9 years old again despite being pushing 30. Linda transferred it before he finished the sentence. It happened again 2 months later. Then it just became a Tuesday thing, an understood thing, never quite discussed, $400 sliding out of one account and into another like a bill neither of them named out loud, the same amount, the same day of the month, quietly automatic. Jenny needed help with daycare after her husband's hours got cut, called crying one night about a bill she couldn't cover and a boss who wouldn't budge on her schedule. Linda started covering half of it, then most of it, watching her grandchildren's daycare bill become, quietly, her own, a line item she never once mentioned when Jenny thanked her, generically, for helping out sometimes. Dorothy's medications weren't fully covered. Dorothy's hearing aids weren't covered at all, for $1,000 Linda paid in a single afternoon without telling either of her own children. Dorothy fell in March, a small fall, nothing broken, but enough to need a home health aide 3 days a week that Medicare wouldn't touch, an ongoing cost that simply attached itself to Linda's account like it had always belonged there. Ask yourself honestly, if it were your mother, your son, your daughter, one at a time, each ask completely reasonable on its own, would you have said no to any single one of them? Linda didn't say no to a single one. Here's the number almost nobody in her family ever saw. Over 4 years, Linda pulled money from her retirement account 19 separate times. Not once for herself. 19 withdrawals, an average of just under $3,000 each one small enough in the moment to feel survivable, each one technically a decision she was fully entitled to make with her own money. $54,000, gone from an account that took 3 decades of double shifts to build, and not one person in her family knew the number existed. This isn't rare, and that should unsettle you more than if it were. Research on this exact pattern shows that nearly 6 in 10 people caught between raising kids and caring for aging parents have reduced or completely stopped their own retirement contributions. Almost 3/4 have cut into their own savings, or their own groceries, to keep the people around them afloat. The people doing this carry a name researchers actually use, the sandwich generation, squeezed from both directions at once, and the squeeze is disproportionately carried by women, who make up roughly 60% of that entire group nationally. 63 million Americans are currently providing unpaid family care of some kind, a number that's grown by 20 million in the last decade alone, quietly, without a single national headline announcing it. Linda never once thought of herself as part of a statistic. She thought of herself as someone whose kids needed help, and whose mother needed help, and who happened to be the one person standing close enough to give it. Picture what fine actually looked like from the outside. Sunday dinners, same as always. Birthday cards with a little extra tucked inside, same as always. Linda, laughing at the head of the table, asking everyone else how they were doing, meaning it completely, never once steering the question back toward herself. Nobody was lying to her. She was the one controlling exactly what got seen, curating it the way you'd curate anything you decided nobody else needed to carry. Why do people do this specifically? Hide the sacrifice instead of naming it. Ask a room full of caregivers and a pattern emerges almost every time. Naming the cost out loud would mean admitting it was actually a cost, and admitting that felt, to Linda, disturbingly close to resenting the people she loved most for needing her. Love and resentment aren't supposed to share a sentence in most families. So she simply never let the sentence form. Not to Marcus. Not to Jenny. Not to herself, most days, until a Tuesday morning on a kitchen floor made the sentence impossible to keep avoiding. There's a second reason underneath the first one, quieter and harder to say out loud. Being needed had become, somewhere along the way, its own kind of identity. Linda had spent 34 years being the calm one in a room full of emergencies. Admitting she needed help herself would have meant setting down a version of herself she'd built an entire career, and an entire family role, around. The stroke wasn't random, exactly, though no single cause gets to claim it fully. Linda's own blood pressure had been climbing for 2 years, flagged twice by a nurse practitioner friend who'd taken it casually at a barbecue and told her, only half joking, to get it checked properly. Linda had the training to know exactly what that meant. She'd also missed her last 3 annual physicals, each time telling herself she'd reschedule once things settled down, once Marcus was steadier, once Jenny's schedule eased, once her mother's fall healed, the same sentence every nurse in America says to herself right up until the week it stops being true. She'd spent 34 years telling other people's families the exact words she never once said to her own: catch it early, don't wait, you're allowed to be a patient too. Jenny found the bank statements 3 days into the hospital stay, going through her mother's mail at the kitchen table to keep the bills from piling up, an ordinary, helpful thing to do for someone recovering. The retirement account statement was folded inside an unopened envelope near the bottom of the stack, the paper slightly soft at the creases from sitting unread for weeks. She almost set it aside unopened, the way you'd skip past something boring, before something made her stop and actually look. The balance was so much smaller than she'd ever imagined. She flipped to the transaction history out of pure disbelief, and the withdrawal history read almost like a diary of the last 4 years of her own family's small emergencies, dates she recognized without wanting to. March, the month Dorothy fell. 2 withdrawals, for days apart, the second one exactly the cost of a hearing aid Jenny had complimented her grandmother on wearing, never once asking who'd paid for it. She sat at that kitchen table for a long time before she picked up her phone. She called Marcus from a hospital cafeteria the next morning instead, unable to hold the statement and make the call in the same room where her mother might wake up and see her face. Neither of them could finish a sentence for a full minute. "Did you know?" Jenny finally managed. "Know what?" Marcus said, and then, before she even answered, "Quieter, the rent thing." "Oh God. It wasn't just me, was it?" Here's the moment worth sitting with. Nobody in that cafeteria felt angry at their mother. They felt something worse. Complicit, retroactively, in a sacrifice they never got the chance to refuse. "She never asked us for anything," Marcus said, finally, "because we never once thought to ask her how she was actually doing, underneath the answer she always gave us." That's the sentence this entire video has been building toward, and it applies to more families than the one in this story. So what does it actually mean to build financial boundaries inside a family that loves each other exactly this much? It starts with a conversation most families never schedule on purpose, a regular, ordinary check-in about money, held before a crisis forces it, where every generation says the actual number out loud instead of a version softened for everyone else's comfort. Not an accusation aimed at anyone. A habit, the same way you'd check in about health, normal enough that nobody has to work up special courage to bring it up. It continues with a rule that feels almost unnatural to say out loud in a loving family: protecting your own retirement isn't selfishness competing against generosity. It's the thing that keeps you able to help at all, for longer, without becoming the emergency yourself. An airline tells you to secure your own oxygen mask first for a reason that has nothing to do with loving your child less, and everything to do with the math of what happens if you pass out trying to reach theirs first. And it means asking for specific, capped help instead of open-ended rescue, on both sides of the conversation. "I can cover $200 a month for the next year, protects a retirement account in a way, I've got it, don't worry about me and never can," because the second sentence has no ceiling, and Linda's for years proved exactly how far a sentence with no ceiling can travel before anyone notices where it's headed. If you're the one quietly giving, the practical version of this starts embarrassingly simply: open your own retirement statement, today, not eventually, and look at the actual number instead of the feeling about the number. If you're on the receiving end, the practical version is just as simple and twice as hard. Ask the person helping you what it's actually costing them, specifically, in dollars, and then genuinely sit with the answer instead of rushing past it toward relief. Families that survive this pattern well tend to share one habit above all the others: they treat generosity like a budget line, planned and visible, instead of a bottomless well nobody has to think about because it's never once run dry in front of them. Linda is recovering now. Slower than she'd like, faster than her doctors expected, the two facts sitting uneasily next to each other the way recovery usually does. Speech therapy twice a week. A slight drag in her left hand that frustrates her more than she'll admit to anyone in the room. The family had the conversation for the first time last month, all four of them, actual numbers on an actual notepad on the kitchen table, the same table where 19 quiet transfers had happened without a single one of them ever being discussed out loud. Dorothy came to, 84 and a little unsteady, insisting on being part of it even though Jenny offered to handle it for her. Marcus cried partway through, reading the withdrawal dates next to his own memory of each phone call that had triggered them. Not from guilt exactly, though guilt was in there somewhere too. From finally being allowed to see the whole number, instead of carrying a version of his mother that never let anyone see her struggle at all, a version he now understood had cost her far more than any of them ever knew to thank her for. They made a plan that afternoon, an actual plan, capped amounts, shared responsibility split 3 ways instead of landing entirely on Linda, a standing quarterly check-in already on everyone's calendar for the first time in the family's history. Nobody pretended it fixed the $54,000. It didn't. What it did was make sure the next $54,000, if it ever threatened to happen again, would happen in the open, where 4 people could see it coming instead of 1. Here's the sentence worth carrying out of this video: the strongest person in a family is very often the one nobody thinks to check on, precisely because she spent years making sure nobody ever had a reason to. Linda still keeps that ambulance bill in a drawer, the one from the 6-minute ride. She hasn't paid it off yet. For the first time in her life, she's letting her children help with something, on purpose, out loud, watching Marcus quietly add $20 to it most weeks the way she once added $400 to his rent without ever mentioning it. It took a stroke to teach a nurse of 34 years the one lesson she'd spent her entire career failing to give herself. She keeps the grocery list too, the one that trailed off midward on the counter that morning. Never finished it. Never threw it away either. It sits in the same drawer as the ambulance bill now, two unfinished things from the same Tuesday, both of them, in their own way, still waiting to be completed by someone other than her alone. Every family believes generosity is measured by what you give. It was never that. It's measured by whether anyone else in the room is watching closely enough to notice what it's actually costing you, and by whether you ever let them. You cannot pour from an account nobody knows is empty. Somebody has to actually ask. And somebody, eventually, has to actually answer.